The prices of animal feed continue to rise, and you've made a decision to have animals on your homestead to provide you good, nutritious food where you can control what they eat. What do? Do you exit the game? Do you sell or harvest those animals and just give up? Here's a possible solution that can not only help you save costs, but also provide you with a higher quality of feed. We'll discuss how to set up a fodder system on this episode of the 2 Acre Homestead.
Welcome to the 2 Acre Homestead. Come along with us on our journey from a small suburban homestead lifestyle to our new lifestyle, homesteading in the rural countryside of southern Arizona. We'll share with you our tips, tricks, successes, and failures from both our past suburban lifestyle to our new rural lifestyle, all on the 2 Acre Homestead.
Welcome back. Well, this is an episode that I've been looking forward personally to talking with you about, and that's setting up a fodder system. My lovely wife, Lisa, is going to take this episode off, so I just wanted to take a few moments here to talk to you about a smarter way to feed your animals on your homestead. Now, this is something that I had done some research on because in our case, we've been raising chickens particularly since 2015, and we've added other animals since then, like rabbits, turkeys, and now goats. And one of the things that we've noticed over the years, especially these last couple of years, is the cost of bagged animal feed continues to rise. Even bales of hay, we typically buy alfalfa hay, have continued to rise. So I started looking into possible alternatives because the price of that bagged feed has gone up. A few years ago, I remember paying maybe $13 for a bag of feed. The scratch grains would be a little bit less, but the bagged chicken feed, for example, for laying hens was maybe around $13. Today it's around $20 or so, and that's for non-organic feed. So a fodder system is a really good alternative for you to think about when feeding your animals. Now, I wanted to explain, first of all, what is fodder? Just looking up a definition online, this is what it says. And bear with me for a moment because you know how those dictionary definitions sometimes go with the language that they use. But here we go. This is what it says. Fodder is any agricultural foodstuff used specifically to feed domesticated livestock, such as cattle, rabbits, sheep, horses, chickens, and pigs. Fodder refers particularly to food given to the animals, including plants cut and carried to them, rather than which they forage for themselves. It can include things like hay, straw, silage, sprouted grains, and some other things. So in other words, what it's saying is fodder, instead of relying on bagged food, this is food that you cut and carry to the animals themselves. So why? What's the point? There's two main reasons why this really interested me. The first was that it can really be a lower cost for you to provide good quality feed for your animals. And second, that feed ends up being a lot better nutritional value when you give it to them. So I'm going to concentrate on chickens, but as the definition mentioned there, you can use this idea to feed cattle, rabbits, sheep, horses, and even pigs. So I'll just explain to you the way we've set up our fodder system on our homestead and some of the benefits, some of the things that I've learned in setting this up and why this can be a benefit, and even share with you what type of cost savings I see personally in setting up such a system. Now, before explaining the fodder system that I've been working with here on our homestead, I thought I'd mention before we got goats on our homestead, we had researched and found a dairy farm local to us that provided raw cow milk, Jersey cow milk. And my wife had talked to one of the workers there. They deliver it to a store nearby. And they mentioned that they've used a fodder system for quite some time. And that has really helped them to economize the amount that they spend on feed and to give good quality feed to their dairy cows. I researched the company that they mentioned to her, and they said, yeah, you should have your husband check it out. But it looked like that was more of a commercial type system. We only have we have 22 chickens on our property, to turkeys as well. So that didn't seem feasible, but it was interesting because just learning that was something that worked for them, especially when it comes to cost and also providing good quality feed. So in a smaller operation, if you're in the city or you're in the countryside like we are here, this type of system can definitely bring you some benefits. So I just wanted to take some time and explain to you how I have set up our system, what I found that works, and some tweaks that I've had to make sure that it runs well and it can provide you good quality food, and hopefully you'll see why it also is a much lower cost. So let's just take the example of a grain that you can buy. I did some research, and it's about a half an hour drive from where we're at. There's actually a grain mill, and they sell whole grains there. So things like milo, millet, barley, whole oats, corn, and so on. And they sell them in different ways. One is you can buy 50-pound bags, or if you have the means, you can buy those 55-gallon rain barrels that have the tops cut off, and they have a feed type enclosure with a metal ring, and you can store about 360 pounds or so, depending on the grain, per 55-gallon barrel. Or if you have a loader, if you have a way to unload this off of a truck, a trailer probably, you can get those totes that they have. And this particular facility will sell you those totes, and you can, I believe, get the cost back if you give it back to them when you return. But then you can get a much larger quantity at a discount. So for me, I decided I don't have that type of equipment. I don't have a tractor, but I was able to buy 1,000 pounds worth of grain. I decided to buy equal amounts of milo and barley. I know that chickens will eat both, and I thought that those would be two good grains to kind of start with. If you're not familiar with milo, it's maybe if you think of a head of a pin, one of those pins that has a small white ball as a head, very small grain, but it sprouts really nicely and looks like a nice green grass. That's probably the best way that I could describe it. So I started with the milo. So let's talk about how can you set that up to be a pretty easy system for you to manage and be able to provide. Like I said, I'm going to start with just talking about chickens. That type of system, how can you be able to daily provide those chickens good quality fodder from that system? So the first thing that I did was I bought a wire rack that had 4 shelves. Doesn't have to be too deep, but this is something that will help you to store your bins or seed trays to be able to grow the fodder. So pretty simple, maybe $30-$40 for a wire rack with wheels on it. I started initially in our garage, but the smell was unpleasant, so moved it outside to closer to where the chickens were. So the first thing I would recommend is you get some type of wire rack with wheels that you can put these bins on. Then you'll need a type of bin to store the grain each day. So you could use those black seed trays, or another solution that I've tried that I really liked over the seed trays was to buy some plastic bins that have covers on them. I decided to get some that let light through, but also had a cover so that way it could retain the moisture once I would water it through the day. So on that wire rack, my rack held 12 bins going across on those various shelves. And on the very top, what I would do is I would store buckets on top, a container of bleach, and that's pretty much it. Had a hose nearby, but I also had some rain barrels that I could use if I needed to water those as well. So this is what you do. Start out with, let's say, 2 bags of Milo, 2 50-pound bags of Milo. And I'll explain why in a minute, because you want to try to see how the system works before you go full bore like I did and buy 1,000 pounds worth of feed. But start with 2 bags of 50-pound Milo, okay? And then have 1 bucket handy so you can use as far as watering. Get some type of strainer or sieve so you can strain the grain once you soak it. And then bleach, like I mentioned, and then some type of measuring cup so you can measure out your seed. So basically, this is the process.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Are you looking to build a homestead from the ground up? Or maybe you're looking to build an off-grid dream home, a vacation home, or maybe just a piece of land to call your own. Visit yourcheapland.com to buy rural land in the wide open spaces of southwestern United States. When you visit yourcheapland.com, they're here to help you, and with their help, you can do this. You can take your dream of owning land and make it a reality. Most down payments are only $294, including the document fee. Remember, everyone qualifies for financing at yourcheapland.com. Head on over to yourcheapland.com and start making those dreams come true. And now, back to our podcast.
Day 1, what you do is you measure out the amount of seed that you're going to put out to soak. So I started out with, 2 to 4 cups or so. using one of those clear measuring cups. And you want to play with this to see what works for you. Depends on the size boxes you have and so on. But basically measure that out and put it in a 5-gallon bucket, and then just fill it up with a bit of water, at least enough to go over the top of the grain. Let's just call it 2 gallons worth of water. So before you cover it, you want to put a little bit of bleach in there, maybe a cap full, and cover the bucket and let it sit for 24 hours. That's all you do. Now, first of all, you might be thinking, well, why would you put bleach in there? Before getting into this particular system, I found out that if you don't add a little bit of bleach, at least initially, you can develop some mold growing in there. So this is not enough bleach where it's going to kill that seed, but it's going to be just enough where it's going to help to prevent mold growing. Okay, so you've got your 5-gallon bucket. You go out the next day, and now what you do is you take that bucket, you pour it into this sieve, something where the Milo is not going to fall out of, but you can pour all that water with a little bit of bleach and the Milo into, and now you've got your seeds. So then what you can do is you can just take a hose and spray that Milo down a little bit so you get the residual bleach off of there. And in your first bin that you've pre-drilled on the bottom, you want to make some really small holes that aren't going to let the Milo fall through. But anyway, you just play around with it and just make sure the Milo is not going to fall through, or whatever grain that you're going to sprout. And you pour all that seed into the container, and then you fill the container, let's say halfway, with water, and then put a cover on it and let it drain through. And that's all you need to do. So you repeat this process every day. And imagine if you have 12 of these bins, just as an example. Let's say you have 4 on the top, 4 on the next row. What'll happen is you're going to start to have a system where if you move the first day's feed down 1, by the 5th day, you're going to now have 4 on the top, 1 on the bottom, and that water is going to start to pour down through the holes and start to water the next guy down, and then you can cover it after that water is drained through. So you're just going to repeat this process every single day. You're going to 2 to 4 cups, a little bit of bleach and some water, about 2 gallons maybe, and soak that for 1 day, and then you're just going to move them through. So now what's nice is on the 8th day, you should have enough food there that you can feed your animals, and it's going to look like tall grass, maybe at least a couple of inches. But after a few days, you should start to see those sprouts, start to come through and so on. With your hand, you could just kind of gently stir it around a little bit if you want those sprouts to kind of just come to the surface a little bit. But before you know it, if you've got this down pat, you'll see that as the days go by that 6th, 7th, 8th day, you're going to have several inches of nice green grass, basically, that's going to be healthy. It's going to provide your chickens nutrients. And what's cool too is if you lift that up, if you pull a handful of that grass up, depending on how much seed you've put into those bins, you'll notice that those sprouts at the bottom have matted together. So imagine taking that bin, you take it out to your animals, you'll be able to at least pull out sections, or maybe the whole thing, depending on how much seed, how dense you've packed that seed in there, and you'll be able to set that down for your chickens. They're going to be happy campers. They're going to be eating some good stuff. So why does that save you money? you might wonder. Um, it depends on how much seed you put per bin. Seed trays, you can spread that out a little bit bigger because those seed trays are pretty long, pretty wide compared to those kind of shoebox size plastic containers. But what I found is if you put the cover on those shoebox size containers, it's a lot nicer because you're going to retain that moisture. And if you keep this fodder system outside, I know for us, when we started getting the heavy monsoons out here in southeastern Arizona, it was kind of presenting a problem because the rain was just giving it too much humidity. So I found that was a benefit. It kept the moisture inside and it made it more of a controlled environment. Now, depending on how much fodder, how much seed you put into each bin, depending on, your humidity and so on and how well you water it, you might find you might need to do it twice a day as far as watering. I did some measuring, let's say a pound of seed. If you were to measure it by weight, a pound of seed might yield several pounds of sprouts. I don't want to focus too much on that because it really depends on how you do it yourself. I recommend you kind of start out with maybe 2 to 3 cups per bin. See how that works for you. You might want to increase it. I found, having it a little more dense, maybe 3-4 cups sometimes worked better, but do what works for you. So the main things are really to make sure that you soak it initially with a little bit of bleach in that water, and then daily water probably a couple times a day, and then keep those lids on there. And in 8 days, 7-8 days, you're going to have a consistent food system that you can give to your animals. And then, of course, too, you can play around with, depending on how many animals you have, to see what your requirements are each day. And remember too that your chickens, for example, they're going to still forage for bugs and so on. So don't worry about that. But yeah, imagine that. Imagine if you had a pound of seed yielding several pounds worth of food for your animals. Imagine how that might save you some money. Now, I mentioned start out with maybe 2 bags, 50 pounds each of grain. Milo seemed to be a pretty easy seed for me to start with. Barley, at the time of year that I started it, in the springtime, didn't seem to be responding as well, so I moved to the Milo, and that seemed to be doing well. As we get into the more fall season, my wife and I talked about this. If you read in the Bible where it talks about sprouting barley, the barley harvest, and so on, that's in those later months in the fall. So I'll be starting to switch to that to see when the ideal time is, and we'll be switching to barley. But I mentioned start out with 2 50-pound bags. Thinking about feed prices right now, and of course this will vary in your area, but let's just say feed is around 20 to 25 a bag for a 40 or 50-pound bag of chicken feed. The particular mill that I bought this seed from at the time, it was around $13 for a 50-pound bag. So that's like going back in time. But it's not just the price of the bag when you consider that you're really stretching that feed, because if you take a pound and stretch it into several pounds worth of feed, now how much are you saving there? So I would encourage you, I don't want to get too much into the details because depending on when you listen to this, I don't know where prices will be and so on, but do the chicken math, calculate it, see how long it takes you to go through one 50-pound bag. How much did that yield you? before you do that, maybe think about how long does it take you to go through one 40 or 50 pound bag of chicken feed? And then you do the math and see if it works out for you if you're just thinking primarily about the cost. But in addition to the cost, think about the quality of the food, because you're talking about giving your animals fresh food. If you garden, you see the difference when you eat those vegetables, when you harvest them and you eat them that same day, especially when it comes to things like green beans, right? They always say green beans, eat them within hours of harvesting them because you get that fresh snap. It's not the same thing when they've been shipped and sitting for weeks and so on. So you're talking about growing sprouted grain. That's much healthier for your animals. It's fresh food that you're giving them, and it's not something that's been sitting in a bag and processed and who knows what other things are added in there. So it kind of reminds me of something that my wife had mentioned on an earlier episode. I believe it was in season 1. And she related a story about how she was talking to her mom and asking her some questions about growing up and gardening and her grandfather and so on. And she asked her mom, well, where did you buy your feed? And I believe the response was, what do you mean? And so it was kind of a shock to my wife that they didn't go to feed stores to feed the animals on their homestead. Well, it's interesting because since maybe the 1950s or so approximately, there's been that push to go and get commercially made feed to use to feed your animals. But that wasn't always the case. 100 years ago, people didn't do that type of thing. They learned to grow their own food for their animals. They reserved a certain portion of their land to be able to grow feed for their animals. So it's a good learning experience that we've had here, just trying to get this working a little bit better, but also it's been rewarding because animals, they love it. They love to eat it, and we see the benefits. So if you're at that point, I know we've heard stories. We've talked to people that we know personally. We've heard stories of people that have raised chickens for egg production, for meat, but with the prices of the feed and sometimes supply issues, sometimes going and they don't have that feed available, they've had to ask that question, do we pull out? Do I pull out? Do I sell these animals? Do I scale back? Do I harvest them and call it quits? Is that where you're at? We know that that's happening out there. So this is a possible solution that can help you stay in the game. This is a possible solution that can help you to continue to raise animals that can provide you healthy food on your homestead. So I hope this has been beneficial to share with you on a way that you can set up a fodder system that you can use to feed your animals. So I'm so glad that you took the time to listen to our podcast, The 2 Acre Homestead. Be sure to visit our website at the2acrehomestead.com. And as always, stay safe out there and happy homesteading.